Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so yeah, just a little bit of the background, as Barbara mentioned. In the early 70s, was in the construction business. Actually started out digging trenches for foundations, but moved on through, had rental property, bought and sold homes, and was home inspector with Home Pro, doing about 3,000 inspections in the time that I was with Home Pro, and retired basically about 2 years ago to do some of this teaching. And I would like to share some of the things that we do. So when we talk about pre-drywall inspection, um, we'll just cover on through what we look for and what we see, and why it is important to, certainly if you're doing new construction, and to do the pre-drywall inspection, and also on older homes, on a resale, if there's been a renovation or if there is one in progress, that it would be a good idea to have it checked out before the walls are covered. So the biggest difference, actually, let me get into the bigger slide. We'll be able to see a lot better. There we go. Okay, so here we're looking at, of course, the pre-drywall. So we're able to have a good look at the installation of everything here. So we're looking at wiring, and we're looking at where the fireplace is inserted. Really important for us to see the actual structure. Things like headers over the windows and what supports those headers. In the walls, how is the electrical wiring done? We can see our heat ducts up here. We can see our joists. This is the second story floor joist. So we can see everything when it's good and open, which is a lot different than when we actually look at it completely covered. Then we can't really have a good look at the components that are there. What we can do is we can test the electrical outlets. We can turn on the light fixtures. We can see that they're actually operating, but we don't really get to see what's behind that drywall or paneling in the walls. So we need to set the client expectations, and that basically comes down to a phone call to our office by your client, and also from you, the agent. So, they want to know, well, how long is the inspection going to take? Well, a resale inspection's going to take about 3 hours. What we're dealing with there in most cases, unless there's been an estate sale or perhaps a sale of a home where the client has been, the seller has actually been transferred for business and now the home is empty, it'll take a little less than 3 hours. We're looking at maybe between 300 plus items on this inspection on a resale that needs to be checked. So we'll actually cover how that's done in just a little while when we actually talk about the home inspection groups that actual inspectors can belong to and get their continuing CE, just as you can and are needed to do for real estate agents. So the resale inspection take about 3 hours. Pre-drywall, perhaps an hour on site. So we don't want to look like we're really rushing through everything. So the big difference is we don't want our clients also to be, what's with the watch? What's going on here? How long is this going to actually take to get done? And they're getting bored. And I can share with you just one instance where I had a client where I wanted to do the home inspection. And when I got there, being it was brand new townhouse that was being inspected, the issue was, I don't really want to get it inspected. I don't know why I need to get it inspected. It is brand new, and all I'm waiting for is my certificate of occupancy from the county. So it was a really hot day in the summer, and I mentioned to the client, I said, look, it's going to be over 140 degrees in the attic. So if you don't want me to do this inspection, I'm happy to go on my way. But I want you to contact your agent first. And if the two of you can agree and I can hear the agreement that we've decided to dispense with the inspection, I'll be on my way and everything will be just fine. When he did get the agent on the phone, she absolutely insisted that we do the inspection. And so he finally agreed and we went on in. We did the inspection, 3-story townhouse. It was about I guess, 45 minutes or an hour into it on the ground floor, when he basically sat down on the step and got on his cell phone and did whatever he wanted to do with his cell phone. And of course, the inspection did take about 2.5 hours. And when it was done, he thanked me for how detailed it was and how much time and what we tested. And then he left, and I went into my vehicle, and I was just finishing up some notes on my computer when the county inspector showed up for the CO. And I got out of my car to go over and kind of greet him and introduce myself to him. But I really, couldn't do that because by the time I got out of my car, literally 15 seconds after he had pulled up, he left the parking area. He never went into the unit, never did check. And that evening, we got the email to say that the certificate of occupancy had been issued. So he didn't even go in there to check it. And that's why it's really important. Brand new construction, the county or the city does not guarantee that there won't be any defects in the unit. And it's certainly, if it's not inspected for a CO, the whole idea there is to go in and make sure that everything is working the way it should be. There are no open gas lines, things like that. So it was just a good thing that he decided to go ahead and do it. Okay, so really the biggest difference, the drywall inspection, pre-drywall, is not really a home inspection with a drywall peeled back, because we look at different components and we use a different criteria. So let's look at the differences between resale inspection and new construction. So performance-based is what the resale inspection is all about. Okay, how has it performed to this point, and how will it perform continuing on? We've got the benefit of time there to inform our clients about what we're looking at. With new construction, it's black or white. It's either it's done correctly or it's not. Has the structure been put in there correctly or has it not? Are we missing some components that would be required? So that's the difference. Is it installed properly? So we need to look at things like the HVAC system, the hot water heater, the electrical work. Has it been installed properly? What really overrides even the county inspections or the code is the manufacturer's instruction, because if the manufacturer's instructions for installation are not met, then it basically voids any kind of warranty that would be on the unit. So there's no benefit of time involved. And many times with new construction, there will be limitations. The inspections are broken down into limitations and what needs to be taken care of. So recommendations, if there's a defect that needs to be repaired or adjusted. Those are the two main items to see in that inspection report. So actually what is involved in new construction is we would need to have the International Residential Code. We have certified IRC inspectors in our company at HomePro. And these are the folks that are going to be doing those code inspections and conformity for the general code compliancy. Bear in mind that every county and every city adopts their own portions of the IRC to their own code in their area. So there are tons and tons of different interpretations of the IRC by the county or the city that you're actually in. So the largest investment of time on a new construction, of course, is in the report writing, because we have to look up the code section or installation instructions. So we mentioned earlier that we're looking at perhaps 1 hour on site, looking at the structure and the components that are installed, and then we would be making notes and taking photographs, which would of course be in the report, and then we'd have to go back to our office and look up the code sections or installation instructions in case there were any issues that needed to be done, taking care of this. And the clients are not really aware of this. I think a lot of times the clients are just sort of, oh, this is what he's going to do. Or he just looked around and then he was out of there, and that's not the case. So when we're talking about setting the expectations, one of the questions that comes up is, should I be there? And really on a resale, perhaps not so much. maybe the last hour or so. Certainly during COVID, that's been a bit of a challenge. Folks have been very aware that you don't want to be, within 3 feet when you wear a mask. And so the way we would handle that was that we would actually do the inspection and make a phone call to both you, the agent, and the client, perhaps a 3-way conversation prior to leaving the property when the inspection was complete. And then we would send the report out that evening after we did a little editing, added the pictures, etc. With pre-drywall, it doesn't make much sense for the client to actually be there because again, we would have to look up all of the code issues if there were any, and so that would just be a total use of time that would be better spent in doing the report correctly. So when we talk about the rules of the game, how are we doing our inspections and what are the criteria that we are using to do that inspection? So Home Probe, we're all members of ASHI, American Society of Home Inspectors. The purpose for ASHI was to establish a minimum standard for doing inspections. So what are the minimum standards? Well, it actually outlines what we shall inspect, and it outlines what we must describe, and it also identified what we are not required to do. Okay, so if you wanted to ever check the ASHI standards of practice, you could go to the homeinspector.org standards of practice, or just ASHI.org, and there would be a listing over there. Now, what is the standard of practice? It's the minimum standard, and what does that mean? That actually means that if you have 4 windows in a room, that if you tested 1 or 2 of them, you've met the standard. If there are 6 electrical outlets and you test 1 or 2, then you've met the standard. So you get the picture. It's a minimum standard. What we do at Home Probe is we want to check them all. You know what the deal is. The ones that you don't check are the ones that are likely to show up defective. So we want to make sure that we're actually doing above and beyond the standards. However, as I mentioned earlier, there sometimes are limitations. So if the home has large furniture, refrigerators, things like that, you want to perhaps check the supply line for the water for an ice maker. We're not going to move that refrigerator out of there because we might damage something in the back and cause a problem. So that would be under limitations. Okay, so the whole idea is that the inspector shall inspect the readily accessible, visually observable installed systems and components listed in the standards. With new construction and resale, it's the same. So we need to provide a written report that identifies the components that are deficient, and recommendations to correct or monitor, actually have somebody smarter than us to take a look at it, explain the nature of the deficiencies if they are not apparent, and those items that were present but not inspected should be listed. So that would be a limitation. Okay, so pre-drywall inspections are performed in conformity with the standards, but they're general and do not include or confirm conformity with building codes or other governmental laws and regulations, the manufacturer's installation instructions, or any kind of construction plans and drawings and specifications. Okay, so why would we say we're not inspecting for code when we do a pre-drywall inspection? Well, because to the client, and to the actual builder, enforcement is an issue for us. All right. So then why is it required? It's still an education, and so we're explaining what we're looking at and why it's there, and what actually does it do. So here we are. We're looking at that pre-drywall inspection, and here we're able to see our cables and our HVAC systems and all of our lighting. We're actually, this is actually showing the sheathing, but it has some silver paper here. It's actually an insulation board that's attached to the sheathing that's on the roof, which cuts down the amount of heat that actually goes into the attic space. So that's great for perhaps there's a component like a furnace or a unit up in the or a heat pump in the attic, and we're cutting down on some of that heat, and therefore the ductwork doesn't get as heated, and therefore in the summertime it can carry that air-conditioned air a lot more efficiently through the attic. And it's also fun for the inspectors who have a drop of perhaps 10 to 15 degrees cooler in the attic when we get up there to inspect the unit. So all these kind of questions that might come up from a client while we're there. Okay, so why would we need to do a pre-drawal inspection? Well, here's a typical example. If you're looking at this particular picture here, we look and see this green bottom sill plate, a pressure-treated lumber, and there is a nut and a bolt coming through. There's actually a connector that's coming through the bottom plate to hold the plate in place. There's actually a gap right here where the plate length wasn't continuous all the way through. And we actually would have required another securing bolt right here. So when we look at the actual sill anchor spacing, you can see that there should be on 8-foot centers in Canada or 6-foot centers here in the USA, and the bolts needed to be within 12 inches of the corners or any joint in the actual bottom sill plate. So you can see right here where we actually have the anchor bolt and the nut and the washer, which holds the sill plate in place. And you can see in this particular installation that it was in the poured concrete foundation when the concrete was poured originally. Okay, so why was it there? Well, simply because over the years we see in our area that we have high winds, tornadoes, etc. And so the installation of these bolts and those nuts and washers actually holds the sill plate and the whole structure together and protects it when the winds do come through. You can see that when the wind blows, it creates like pressure or suction, and it sort of lifts or tries to lift the structure off of the foundation. So you can see these schematics down below here, how there's an uplift or a shear that actually can move the whole house off of a foundation. It's not uncommon during a storm that this may happen. So that's why those are there. And over the years, they've come up with different types of what we call FHA hangers and different types of metal structure supports that can even go on something simple like a deck to attach the steps to the deck to give it extra support, over time for any kind of movement to shift to stop that from happening. Also, what's coming, it's been around for a while now, is what we call fire stop. So fire foam or rock wool works. All the gaps or holes, wherever there's something being drilled through the wood structure, we actually install, you can see it's orange here, which actually stops and slows down some of that flame coming through that heat from one level to the level above if the fire is below. Okay, so we have to remember our standards, seeing everything that's accessible, visually observable, installed components, but they have meaning. So we have to be, able to be accessible. So the builder needs to allow us access, and there needs to be no risk to people or property. We don't need to move anything to see what we need to look at, and we don't really need tools to see it. So perhaps we don't even need a ladder taller than 12 feet to see the components that we're looking at. Pre-drywall is just unofficial explanation is visually observable, component located in a readily accessible location. It is viewable by an unaided eye from a single perspective at a level detailed sufficient to permit inspection. There's a whole lot of verbiage for if there's a tiny entrance to the crawl space that we can't get into, that would be a limitation. Perhaps the level, the bottom of the floor joist to the dirt wasn't high enough. 24 inches is the requirement. All of those things would prevent us from actually doing it visually, and that's the whole idea. We want to do that visually observable. Report components that are significantly deficient. So what is actually significantly deficient? Basically, it's not working. So it lacks essential quality of element likely to have an important impact on its ability to perform its intended function, right? So, something simple might be that the AC unit outside wasn't topped up with refrigerant, and so the AC system wasn't working. Perhaps there was some kind of a defect with the thermostat and wouldn't allow us to run the HVAC system, okay? But the objectives are a little different. We want to actually convince the builder to fix the deficient components. So how do we do that? All right, we would cite the generally accepted construction practices. Well, you say, like, what is that? Well, material that's published by generally accepted standards writing organizations. So we select the standards, and they should be written from an authoritative source. And this is what we use: the National Building Code, local building codes and amendments, manufacturer's instructions or the code extension, and all the different types of home inspection groups like ASHI, National Association of Home Builders, etc. Also, Brick Industry, Engineered Wood Association, American Wood Council, Gypsum National Association of Home Builders guidelines, research center documents, manufacturer's instructions. So there's a lot of different stuff, specifically when you go into new construction and pre-drywall. When we report the deficiencies, we need to identify that deficiency, describe why the client should care if the deficiency is not corrected, if it's not self-evident, and recommend the correction, the evaluation and monitor. And it's important to give direction, of course. And this is why we give a cost estimate in our inspections. So we would cite, cite standards used in general. Okay, so pre-drywall, we're looking at roofs here. We inspect the roof covering in the underlayment, the sidewall, the valley, penetration, flashings, skylights, chimneys, and roof penetrations. And we need to describe the roofing material and how it is inspected. Okay, sidewall flashings, fascia board. So we see our sidewall flashing here. You can see the siding hasn't been installed yet. So we can see how this has been installed. It's been sealed and it's step flashing. And then on the front here, the fascia board, it's actually a fascia board flashing that goes between the sheathing of the roof and the fascia board itself. That's a fairly new application in the last, say, 5 to 10 years. Prior to that, they used to just have the fascia board, and there was a little gap between the actual fascia board and the roof sheathing, which is a great place for bees and for little critters to be able to crawl into the attic space. Bats, etc., would all be able to get in through those little spaces. Okay, we're also able to lift up the shingles. As you can see here, we're looking at some raw plywood, and there is no flashing here, so that we'll be able to call that out and have that taken care of. In this particular case, we're looking for the missing kick-out flashing. And kick-out flashing is basically a 90-degree flashing that would go here at the last edge of the siding, turning to what we're looking at to the right, where you see the red arrow pointing here, that would stop water from running off the end of the roof and running down the side of the house here. Obviously, there would be a gutter installed here, and that kick-out flashing would, any water coming down the gutter along the roof along at this point would drop into the gutter and be diverted there by that kick-out flashing. You can see here how it actually works. In this particular case, we're looking at the house wrap or sheathing that's on there, and we have our flashing installed, and here are our shingles. So that's a good, good look at how it actually takes place. Rarely do we have a benefit of time with pre-drywall, but sometimes we get lucky. There's been rain, and there've been some areas that were penetrated, and so we see our, we go ahead and see what goes on here. Okay. Continue on. Interior water supply, distribution components. We need to look at all of those. Also the drain, the waste, and the vent components. All the supports and the installation for the water supply. Fuel storage and fuel distribution components. So we're talking about gas or electric for the water heaters. All the vents, the flues, and all those similar components. And all the clearances. So today, most new construction in the lower price ranges, perhaps below 500K, we're looking at PEX, PEX, which is a plastic water supply. So we want to be sure that nothing is too close to any kind of vents that from the HVAC or a hot water heater that may have been gas that are involving heat. Certainly also plastic piping around recessed light fixtures that put out a bit of heat as well could cause a melting issue on our plastics. So we'll describe all of the drains, the waste, and the supply, as well as the vent piping and the water heating equipment and the location of the main water heater shutoff. Let me see this thing right here. See if I can't just move this out of the way. I don't see anything right now. Okay, so rarely we do have the benefit of time again on pre-drywall, but here we are. We're looking at all the components and we're making sure that everything is installed the way we want it to be. But builders are also thankful to us when we do point out things. So here we can see in this condo that we've got a water supply line here for our fire extinguishers, and they've dropped that below the actual beams, and therefore the drywall would be blocked. They would have needed the installation to have been above the PVC water drainage instead of above. And here we had picked up on the toilet drain was too close to the framing in the bathroom, so they put in an extension to move it away from the wall, and therefore they wouldn't have to break it all out with tile perhaps later. Again, lucky we found a leak on the water system as well. Electrical system, we're looking at the service drop, etc. All of the components involved in the electrical system. We're also going to describe the amperage and voltage rating of the service equipment and the secondary panels and where they're located. All right, so we want to make sure is the wiring secured properly? Does it have nail plates and boxes? These are the openings that would be in the actual panel. We want to make sure that the wiring is protected. We need a 1 1/4 inch recessed, and we would need a nail plate. If it's actually recessed further into the stud, we would not need the nail plate. We'll be checking for that. Damaged electrical sheathing. You can see the staple here, and there's a little bit of a damaged component of the covering right there. UFER grounding connections, we see right here, that's our grounding system. Most new construction now has UFER grounding. The old days, we would ground to a copper water pipe or galvanized steel water pipe, or have a rod driven in outside in the yard somewhere. So new construction, HVAC components, all of the ducts, the distribution piping, etc. Condensate disposal components, access to the system, clearance at the vents, all, etc. What kind of system is it? Is it electrical or is it heat? And at this point, perhaps there's a limitation that there's no power on at the home, and we couldn't test it. So there we are. And a couple of the other things, missing some sealant right here at the main plenum, ductwork that's become disconnected or not sealed correctly, interior stairways, headroom treads, risers. We're looking at, right here, you're looking at a 10-inch minimum for a step tread, 7 3/4 inch maximum height for each of the steps, and no more than a 3/8 inch variance. I mean, 4/8 of an inch is 1/2 inch, so less than 1/2 inch variance between any of the steps on the flight of steps. And again, from the plane of the step to the high to the ceiling, a minimum of 6 feet and 8 inches. So it's a lot better when we're looking at the unfinished construction process. Much better to found it there than here. You can see it's just a short riser, another short one, and then we start getting larger and larger. In this particular case, it was a matter of there was an attic that had been vaulted and extended to have living space. But you can see here that it wouldn't have met the standards because of the varying heights of the risers here. There's no standard, pre-drywall for insulation and ventilation. And if there's insulation installed, can I still do my job? For sure. Insulation can easily get overlooked in the process. So, here we have insulation of the tub, but they didn't put in the insulation yet, so it's going to be more difficult. Kind of poke it down there to make sure that it's in, but you can't really see if it's doing installation correctly once we get beyond the first section. Same here where the jet tub went in, hard to get that insulation in there. This is a much better way to do it, where you can actually see the insulation is installed first, and then we've gone in and gotten our water restrictor barrier before the green board went in there. Okay, so resale, everything's grouped under structural components. Pre-drywall, it breaks it out separately into the foundation, floor system, wall, and roof system. So we'd inspect all the footings, pier pads, similar components, foundation walls, all those fasteners and straps that I talked about, bolts and similar components, concrete foundation slabs, waterproofing, foundation. So you can see there's a ton of stuff that goes into it. Obviously, when it's open like this, we can see where things are taken care of. They weren't installed correctly. This one's been cut too close to the bottom panel. There's actually in the delivery of I-joists, there's a schematic that comes with the joists themselves to the site, which shows where the drilling and where the openings can be done. We're actually past the 30-minute webinar, but I just want to finish, so please hang with me. We're inspecting all the beams, etc. Here we have a picture of support of a patio that actually came through just the plywood wall. This one's actually sticking through there, and there's no support. There should have been a horizontal structural piece here to hold it, give it more support. So just because the home is new doesn't mean they're free of defects. Local government inspections do not guarantee there be no defects. Even good quality professional builders make some mistakes. Low-cost subcontractors are not always the most professional. So, looking at even foundation to grade, 6 to 8, 6 inches below the brick, 8 inches for siding or stucco. Weep holes or wicks should be clear of water infiltration and wood destroying components as well, like termites. So we're looking at this. See the planter, the weep holes are actually below the dirt here. And the result was 3 months later, the buyer found this behind the basement wall, and a really big cost involved there. Watch out for the floor cuts. So these are all things that we have to watch out for. Some, even on older construction, plumber went through and just cut the joists over there. So structural defects is determined by calculation by structural engineer, so they shouldn't be changed without the engineer's approval. Many times errors are made in the field, structural changes are made without any approval, and other times installation is not done properly. So looking at just some of these misaligned foundations here, wood shims are installed, bad planning. This is a whole floor system that's supported on one piece of 2x4 because they moved that vent in there. And this had just passed the local municipal code inspection. What actually happens when things aren't supported correctly is you can see the settling here, which happened just after the inspection had been done by the county. Okay, so last minute changes, we don't like to see those, just plain bad luck, things that are kind of funny that we find. Okay, I think at this point we're going to stop the share, and Barbara will step back in for a moment and we will check.
Hey, Rael, there is a question in the chat if you want to just take a look at that real quick.
Okay, so yeah, Natalie, so that's what we were talking about, where we have to look
Hey,
up.
Rael, will you just read the question? Sorry, just so people know.
Okay, so the question was, so if something is not built to code, you as the inspector won't be able to recognize that. Who's responsible for ensuring the home is built to code, or the builder met the manufacturer's instructions? And that's up on us. So when we talk about our inspectors, here, let me just change this. There we go. So when we do the inspection on new construction and our inspector is IRC certified, then we will be pointing out those things. And that's why I mentioned in the presentation that the looking up of the issues is involved. And that's where most of the time is taken up in order to point out these issues. And again, as we mentioned, perhaps the enforcement would be an issue. But if we could explain to the builder and cite the actual code violation, then it behooves him to go ahead and make the changes. At that point, then it would be up to the builder to perhaps question even the city or the county and move on from there. Anybody else?
Is it? Oh, I think that's it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I will send you guys a follow-up email this afternoon and let you know, because we sort of are focusing on new construction in August. We have a building permit CE taught by Rael next week. that is from 10 to 1, that is 3 hours of CE credit. If you want to continue down this road and learn about new construction. We also have a great CE class pass, which I'll send you an email about for all of, we have 5 Atlanta neighborhood CE classes that we're teaching in September. So we believe knowledge is power and want to make sure you guys have all the opportunities to learn. And if you need anything, you know where to reach me, Barbara at home-probe.com. And thank you for your time. Thanks, Rael. We'll see you soon.
Okay.